Part 1 with Edith Susman.
The date is January 29, 1996. The survivor is Edith Susman. The interviewer is Judith Gertler. It is in Encino, California, USA, and the language is English. My name is Judith Gertler. Today's date is January 29, 1996. I have the pleasure of conducting an interview with Edith Susman. We are in Encino, California, USA. Would you please state your name and spell it for us?
Edith Susman, Edithsusman.
And Edith, your name at birth was?
Esther Mermelstein. Estermerstein.
Is it possible that it's Mermelstein? Mermelstein?
Yes.
Thank you. Your birth date, giving the month, the date, and the year?
May 5, 1926.
And your age? Now?
69.
And where were you born? Spelling the name of your town.
Pavlova. Pavlovo. Czechoslovakia.
Okay. Is it possible it's Pavlova, Pavlova?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. Would you tell us a little bit about what you remember the town of Pavlova, Czechoslovakia was like when you were growing up as a young girl?
It was a very small town, and we were maybe 30 Jewish families. And
what was the town of Pavlova like when you were growing up as a young girl?
It was a very small town, and there were not too many industries. There were no place to work. We were very, very poor, so everybody was poor over there. Nothing grew there. It was between mountains, and nothing got ripe, not even tomato. So the people were very, very poor. And most of the families, they had very large families. We were 7 sisters and brothers. And my father worked in a place where they were filling bottles with natural mineral waters. And he had to go every day, walk 5 kilometers to work there all day, and it was freezing, very bad, but he had to make some money to support the families. He used to come home evenings, his face was all frozen. He did not have the proper clothes. And all week he's been working, and came the end of the week, his boss didn't even want to pay him. It was a very, very tough life there. We had no future there, but there was no way out of it. And when I was about 16 years old, I went with my father to help him work there, fill the bottles. In very, very cold weather, my hands were freezing, sticking to the bottles. But there was no choice, no food. It came lunchtime, there was nothing to eat. There were big ovens where they were heating some of the water so they baked the potato. Even that was a shortage. It was a very tough life. And we had one cow, couple of chickens, and it came in the winter time. There was nothing to eat, only potatoes. And the kids used to stand around the stove, and the pot of water used to boil, and my mother had nothing to put in that pot to feed the children. Then my mother's brother, who lived in a different city, he was a businessman. When he used to go do the buying for the business, he used to send us sacks of flour and butter, and that helped my parents to survive. But then came a time where he had to go to hard labor and in the forest just to torture. And he was killed there, and that ended our food for the family.
Esther, you mentioned your parents. Tell us what your mother's name was and what your father's name was, please.
My mother's name was Sarah Heisler, and my father's name was Yankel Memmerstein.
And you mentioned that you had 6 brothers and sisters. Would you tell us what their names were, please?
My sister next to me is Malka, Yossel, Mendel, Berl, Leib, and Hannah. She was the youngest.
And you were the oldest.
I was the oldest.
Did you know any of your grandparents?
I just knew my mother's mother, who lived in a different city. My grandfather had passed away when I was very young. I barely remember him.
Do you remember either of their names, either your grandmother or your grandfather on your mother's side?
On my mother's side, my grandma's name was Rivka, and my grandfather's name was Berl.
And where did they live?
In Wolowitz. That's about 25 kilometers from our home. We didn't see them too often. We couldn't afford to travel there.
And what about your father's parents? Did you ever hear anything about them?
My father's parents died very young that I didn't know them. I am named after my father's mother, Esther.
You mentioned when we were talking before that there were about 30 Jewish families in your town. Tell us about what Jewish life was like in Pavlova before the war.
It was, people cared for each other, but everybody was so poor they couldn't help one another. And there was a small shul there. They used to go to shul on Shabbat and high holidays. It was a very close-knit town, but everybody was very, very poor over there.
Do you remember going to synagogue as a young girl, when you were younger?
Yes, my father used to take us. On a high holiday, we used to go there with the family.
What do you remember about sitting in shul, and what did you see and what did you hear?
Well, in the shul sitting, the women were sitting upstairs, separate from the men. All I knew, the way they were praying and crying. That's about all.
What Jewish holidays do you remember celebrating in your home? And how do you remember celebrating them?
For example, it came a Passover. We were not allowed to have bread. So we didn't have places where they made commercial matzahs. We had to roll them by hand. And I was the oldest from the family, I used to go and roll the matzahs with no pay, but they gave us matzahs for the Passover holiday. It was very hard work. My hands used to swell, but we had no choice. I had to do it in order the family to have matzahs.
What else comes to mind when you think of the Passover Seder?
If we were lucky to have a chicken for the Passover, my mother didn't know who to give the wing first or the drumstick first because there was very little. But sometimes they used to raise geese for the Passover holiday, and the Shoah used to come and kill the geese. And when the way he killed it, he used to blow out the weishet, that's like from the throat. They take it out, and he scraped it, then he says it's not kosher, you cannot eat it. And that made it so tough, very, very tough. But that's what happened.
Anything else come to mind thinking about either Yom Kippur or Rosh Hashanah or any other Jewish holidays?
In my town, everybody was religious. They observed the best way they could. Really very religious. We were not allowed to tear a paper. We were very, very orthodox. But we were together, and we tried to enjoy as much as we can. The family was together.
What was Shabbat like in your home?
On Shabbat, we were not allowed to light. We did not have electricity. So we had a non-Jewish lady come in, and she used to light for us the stove, and she used to milk the cow. And we used to cook on Friday, and we had these special ovens where they made chunt, and they put them in the ovens overnight to cook. It was beans and potatoes, but it was very, very good because there was not too much food.
Tell us about your schooling.
When we were growing up, there was two kinds of school. One was like Ukrainian, and there was Czech school when I was growing up. I went to Czech school, but I went only till 6th grade. And my brothers and sisters, they also went to Czech school, but very short time.
And why was that?
They were very young, and they took us away.
What languages did you speak in your home?
Mostly Yiddish and Russian. It's like Ukrainian. And some people, older people, spoke Hungarian from the World War II when the Hungarians were there. My family did not speak Hungarian in the house. Only Jewish, only Yiddish.
You mentioned that the Jewish community was about 30 families.
Yes.
What kind of relationship did the Jewish community have with the rest of the community, with the larger community?
It was a small community.
So there were, but were there also non-Jews in
There
your
was
town?
a lot, yes, non-Jewish people. And we got along fine. We never had crime or anything. Got along fine because they were very poor too.
Did you ever experience any anti-Semitic taunts or people saying things or doing
Yes,
things?
when we were kids, we used to play with the non-Jewish children, and they used to say to her, "You Jew, go to Israel." But we ignored it.
So, as you think back over your pre-war growing up, what stands out the most for you about growing up in Pavlova?
uh, the worst thing was that people were very, very poor. We couldn't afford any clothes. We could not afford anything. My heart used to go out that there was no food for the young kids, no clothes. We used to wrap around our feet with rags to go to school. It was very, very cold there. But we survived somehow.
When you were about a teenager, there were a lot of problems going on in pre-World War II and World War II. What was the first sign of danger that you heard about?
When the war broke out, we just heard that they were taking away Polish citizens from our areas, but we did not know why or where they were taken.
And then what was the first sign of danger that you and your family experienced personally?
When the Germans came in and they made us wear the Jewish stars, and that's when the problems began. They took men and they tortured them, they pulled their beards, and that's when already the problem started. They took away the radios from us. We didn't know what was going on in the world at all. It was very, very bad. And the next time there were some families living and they were a little better off and they had some connection and they found out what's coming and they were building bunkers. And when they found out that in Slovakia, they were taking away the Jews, they heard already about it. And they built the bunkers because they knew what's coming. But where we were, nobody knew what was coming.
And what finally came to your town?
When the Germans came in, and we had like a head of the town, and he came out with drums, and that was the day right after Passover. And he was playing the drums and announcing, all Jews, pack your things, whatever you can carry, and leave your homes. We had no idea where they were taking us. We had cows and some goats and chickens. We left the doors open and we gathered on the streets, all the Jews, and we had no idea, nobody had an idea where they were taking us. And what ended up to be, we had no bread, they were just preparing to bake bread. We couldn't go to a store and buy bread, there was no such thing. We had to bake our own bread. And we had no opportunity, no chance to bake the bread, because it was in the morning right after Passover. And we gathered and they were telling us you have to walk to the next town, which was 5 kilometers, with the children. And they gathered us up from all the small towns in that town in the school, and we had no idea where we're going and what they're going to do with us. We were sitting there with no food, no water, no sanitation in that school, hundreds and hundreds of people. And we were sitting in that school and waiting, and it was maybe a week or so. We were sitting in that school on the floors. There was no place to sleep or anything. Finally, they came with trucks and took us to Munkaj. And there was a brick factory. And they gathered all the Jews from those areas, thousands of them, in that brick factory. It was outdoors, cold, no food, and no place to sleep on the floors with the children. And we did not know what was going on. Nobody knew what's going on. And being I was the oldest and 18 years old, there was a policeman came and he picked me, not only me, a group of girls, and allowed us to go to the city to buy some food. And they took us with trucks, a group of young girls. There was some young men too. And somehow we found some food in those areas, and we came back, potatoes and maybe some bread, and there was no place to cook. They made little campfires in cans. They were cooking the potatoes to feed the children. And the Nazis came and kicked those pots, and it spilled out, and there was no food for the children. And they chose the men, including my father. They took him away for the day, and we had no idea where they were taking them. They took him to a place in the mud to make push-ups in the mud. My father came back black. It was the most horrifying thing you want to live through. And that was going on, I don't remember exactly how long, but it was, I think, a couple of weeks we were there. And they had some kitchen there where they gave us some liquid there, but it was no way enough to live on that. It was terrible, and there was no place to sleep on the concrete floors with the children, young kids, everybody crying. It was the most terrible thing a human being can live through. But we were helpless. Nobody listened to us. Finally, they were taking groups into those cattle trains. And a couple of hundred they pushed in one of those cattle trains. No windows, no sanitation, nothing. The whole families. And nobody knew where they were taking us. Some men, more educated people, they looked through some peepholes to see on the tracks. Maybe they'll recognize. They did not recognize. We did not know where they were taking us. We were in those trains. A lot of people died. We were sitting on the dead bodies. We couldn't go to a bathroom. In that, we were sitting there. No water. Children were screaming. It was hell. Finally, we came to Auschwitz. And they let us out over there. And we had no idea where they were taking us. They were separating the young children with the mothers. The fathers, they selected to go in different place. My sister and me, they told me to go to one side. My mother with the younger children went to another side. My brother, who was at the time 14, he went with my father. I didn't know where they were taking us. They took us to a building. It was just walls and concrete. They undressed us, my sister and myself, and they gave us some striped dress to wear. They shaved our heads. My sister was standing near me. I did not recognize her. It was freezing cold. My mother went with the younger children. I never saw them again. My father, they selected to work in the crematorium. And my brother, they selected, being he was so young, they put him to work in the kitchen to peel potatoes. And when we were in Auschwitz, in Birkenau, we had to line up every single day. Dr. Mengele came to count us if we didn't run away in the freezing weather that's near the Polish border. It was terribly cold. We just hugged each other to keep warm. And every time he counted with a rubber stick. He banged us over the head, and he selected us. You go here, you go there. My sister, they told her to go to one side. And we knew that I thought, I didn't know where they were taking us. Finally, when we stayed in those barracks in Auschwitz, there were people from Poland. They came much earlier there. They were there for years already. And they asked us, do you know where your parents are? We said, no. You see the crematorium there, the smoke? That's where your parents are. And when they separated me from my sister, I thought they took her there. And she thought they took me there. So I didn't see my sister at all. But they were taking us to work. There was a factory in Auschwitz. They were working for the defense, making the cellophane ropes. Every day we were marching by the crematorium. And my father was working in the crematorium, and he heard female voices. He pulled himself up on the wall and threw over a note. And one of the girls caught the note and gave it to me. And he said, your mother, I put in the oven. And I saw my father. He looked black. He looked terrible. And that's the only time I saw him. And we were working, marching every day there to Birkenau to work in that place for the defense. When that ended, they took us to a place where there was a river going. They made us shovel dirt into the river to turn around. Every shovel we threw in, it was just washed away. It was just torture. Then they put us on the streets with hammers to chop rocks, stones. And they watched us, the Gestapos watched us. We should produce a certain amount. If we didn't produce a certain amount of those stones, they were beating us terribly. It was just terrible. We lived in those barracks with a lot of people, and we slept there on straw. And there was no sanitation. They put a little straw there. We had lice, maybe 2 inches big, eating us up. There was no place to wash. So being we had the lice, they took us to sterilize our clothes to a big building where there was no heat or anything. We were nude all night until they sterilized the clothes. We shouldn't have the lice. Finally, we got out of there. They didn't give us much to eat. They had bread like made out of sand. And they gave us once in 2 days, a piece of bread. And we had to make sure we have for the next day. So we used to pinch a little piece of bread. And they gave us some kind of soup. It tasted like from grass. But we were happy together.
Edith, what kinds of relationships did you make with other girls and women when you were in Auschwitz?
When we were in Auschwitz, things were so bad that everybody tried to survive. If somebody got a little more food than the next one, they would not share because they were worried for themselves. It was very, very bad. But also they selected people from the Jewish, from our group, to serve us the food. And they used to steal from us. And they didn't give us enough, but they ate much more than we did. Looking back now, I can see why, but at that time, I felt like killing them. But there was nothing we can do. We just tried to survive. Everybody tried to survive. And going back, my brother, when he was selected to work in a kitchen there, he was stealing food and bringing it back to the barracks for the older people. And when I met these older people after the war, they told me if not my brother, they wouldn't be alive. He was so good to them. Then they were as close, the bombing was coming, they tried to ship us further out from Auschwitz to different places. We went to Bergen Belson from Auschwitz. And over there, we didn't work. They just starved us. It was awful there. A lot of people dying. We were sitting on the dead bodies. There was no crematorium. And I don't remember exactly how long we were there, but the bombing was coming closer. Every time they started to bomb, I am not sure whether it was the Russians or who was bombing. They kept us moving further into Germany. So we stayed in Bergen-Belsen, and there was a lot of people didn't make it. They died like flies. From there,
Let's just back up just a moment. When you were in Auschwitz, was that where you had your number put on your arm?
yes, they put a number on my arm. I developed an infection there, and somehow it healed up.
Do you remember what your number is?
It's A7994.
Do you remember how it was put on?
They were doing it with a needle, sticking in a needle. My sister did not get a number because she did not stay long enough in Auschwitz. They took her to a different camp. I don't remember what camp she went to, but they did take her to a different camp, so she didn't get a number.
In order to put this in a time frame, I think you told me that you were in Auschwitz perhaps in the fall of 1944, and that you went to Bergen-Belsen sometime in at the end of 1944. Does that sound right to you?
Yes.
Or perhaps you went to Auschwitz in spring of 44, and
Right.
yeah, and
Right.
left in the fall.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anything else about Bergen-Belsen that you wanted to mention? Anything that was different or that was important for you there?
It was very bad, but I don't recall too much from Bergen-Belsen. I recall from the other camp, but not too much because I didn't stay there too long.
Did you make any friends at all? Anybody that you stuck with, that you tried to be with, to stay with?
Yes, there were a couple of girls that came from our area, and I tried to stay with them. There were two sisters. In fact, one of them who was stealing the food from us. But I tried to stay close to them because one of the sisters was much older than I was. and I was very scared. So I tried to keep close to her. And there were some older women also that came from the next town from where I was born. And I tried to be close with these people because I was so very young and I was scared. Some survived. The two sisters survived.
Do you remember their names?
Reggie, I don't remember the next one. And the older lady I remember, Sarah Miller, and her daughter, Rachel Miller. They came to, I was with them.
And then after Bergen Belson, what happened?
From Bergen Belson, they took us to Mauthausen.
How did you get there?
No, they took us to Venusberg. We were marching. A lot of them died as they were marching on the streets. They were just left. I made it to Venusberg. I don't remember exactly how long I was there, but I do remember they took us to work in a factory there where they were making parts for the airplanes for the government. And I had to sit and drill some screws there, standing my feet all night. And they were watching us, how much we are producing. In case I dozed off, the Gestapo came in back of me and beat me over my head. Many times I collapsed. All night we had to work. They didn't do it during the day, but it was at night. I don't remember how long we were there. We used to march to work there, and the trains with the civilians, with the Germans, were going and waving to us, and they were free. And I was wishing, will I ever be free? We watched those trains. They were going, traveling, and we were watched by the Gestapos and beaten for no reason, just because I was Jewish. They took us to that factory every single night, standing all night on my feet with no food. And if we did not produce, they beat us up something terrible. Then I developed typhoid there. And I had very, very high fever. And my cheeks were red. And there were no crematoriums. We had to take the dead bodies and dig graves for the dead bodies to throw in and carrying in the dead bodies, carrying up on a hill and digging graves there. And I was chosen because my cheeks were so red, and they thought I was the healthy one. And when we came to those graves, we were putting in the dead bodies there. I was wishing they should throw me in there. But I survived. My friends over there were cracking coal to give me to take. I had stomach typhoid. And somehow I remained alive. No medication, very high fever, and I survived. I was taking that powder, and that helped me. I had terrible diarrhea, and that helped me to survive.
What were the living conditions like in Venusberg?
In Venusberg, there was those where they were watching us, the Gestapos. They were on, they built booths up high that they can look down into the camp to watch us. There was no way that anybody can run away. In fact, going back to Auschwitz, in Auschwitz, a girl tried to run away and they caught her. And they hung her up in the middle of the camp outside, and they made all the people go out and watch. In case you try to run away, that's what's going to happen to you. So nobody attempted to run away from the camps because it was very, very risky. And in Venusberg, we didn't stay too long either because they were bombing all over the place. I don't know who was doing the bombing. Then they took us to Mauthausen.
And how did you get from Venusberg to Mauthausen?
We were marching, walking. Some people made it, a lot of people did not make it. They died on the way.
As you were walking that long walk, do you remember what you were thinking or how you kept going?
It was awful. They didn't give us any food. Wherever we can grab a piece of grass from the ground to eat, or if we saw a little water, we tried to take some water. But if they would have caught us, they would have beaten us. They wouldn't allow us to take a little water even. And it was going on for days. It was just hell. Hell.
How did you keep going?
I don't know. I think I was very strong-willed, a fighter. Maybe because I came from a poor family. Wealthy girls who came from like Budapest or Holland to the concentration camps, they just died like flies because I guess they were not used to tough life. I was used to tough life, I guess, and I was young. Maybe that's why I survived.
And so you marched, and what happened when you got to Mauthausen?
When we came to Mauthausen, there were two camps. We were separated by wire. One camp was for men, and one camp was for women. And it was those electric wires. We could never go out from there. We didn't work over there. And also they had the Gestapos come in every single day into those barracks, counting us if we didn't escape. And the Gestapos were watching us. They had those big, high, they built booths specially to watch over us. And the people were dying, and we saw mountains with bodies, mountains. The men couldn't survive at all. The men died faster than the women. Somehow, I survived. I don't know how. I don't know how, but the men looked terrible, very skinny and crying.
How did you see the men? Through the fence? Was that
Yes. We were two camps there, one for men, and just divided, separated with barbed wire. That's it. And we saw them there. It was just terrible. The men couldn't take it at all. Not at all. They just mountains with bodies. It was just awful, awful times. How these Nazis can do a thing like that. I cannot believe it, that a human being could do to another human being. To innocent people, torture, children being killed, ripped apart from their mother's arms. I don't know. I don't know how they can do a thing like that. I just hope our children, no people should go through that. Ever again.
I think you told me that you were in Mauthausen in early 1945 until May 1945. What happened to change things for you in May of 1945?
We were in those barracks, suffering and being tortured from the couples. They used to come and beat us.
And the capos were...
The German, the Gestapos, the German women. They used to come and beat us for no reason, torturing us. In 1945, May 5, which was my birthday, the capos didn't come in the morning. We look out. We didn't see the Gestapos watching over us. And a voice came, we are free. We are free. Everybody was running out. We could not believe it. I was freed by the American people. And everybody was running. We didn't know where to go, what to do.
What did you see when you came out of the barracks?
When we came out, it was nobody there. The Germans had gone. And it was a day or two later when American soldiers came in and they told us, you are free. We couldn't believe it. They came and tried to help us. They gave us food. But the problem was they treated us too good. They gave us very rich foods. And our stomachs were shrunk. A lot of people died from the rich food, including my close friends. They could not make it. But from there, when we were free already, we were running again to German homes, take whatever we can. Nobody there, was deserted. It was a town or something like that. We were running around like wild animals. Then somehow they organized us that being we were free, some of us they put in hospitals to help us to get well. A lot of us were very sick. And they took us to hospitals, the American soldiers, and they helped us. And then they organized us, and they asked us where we want to go. And we said we want to go back home.
Before we get to that point, I wanted to ask you just a few more questions, if it's all right.
Yes.
When you were 18 years old, it was your 19th birthday, is that right? Or when you were liberated, or it was very close to that.
Very close
yeah,
to that,
19
yes.
or 20.
Yeah.
I think it was your 19th birthday. What did you look like? What was your body like? What did you...
When I got liberated, I was skin and bone. I lost all my hair from the typhoid fever that I had. I was skin and bone, just like a skeleton. When you see the skeleton, that was me.
And anything else about what you were like that time of liberation? Anything else you remember about that?
What I do remember when I got freed, and then they organized us to go home, and they put us on a boat. We went with the Daniel to Czechoslovakia. We went to look for family who survived, who didn't survive. And wherever we went, they had already the Hayas organizations. And we found out they helped us. We were able to travel with no money. We didn't have to pay. It was right after the war. When I came to Czechoslovakia, that was Bratislava, the city. They put us up in a building there. And we stayed there maybe a week or so. We went to the Hayas. Whoever survived and went to the Hayas, we left our names on the walls in case somebody's looking for us. I didn't see any of my family there. And the non-Jewish people were very nice after the war. in Bratislava, that's a city in Czechoslovakia. And they tried to help us. They gave us food because we had no money to buy food. And they tried to help us, and we were waiting. Maybe some of the families will come home. Nobody came home. Then I went back to Munkac. I did not go to Pavlova. I didn't want the 9 Jewish people to question me, where my family is. I went to Munkac, and over there a lot of survivors went, a lot of girls. And there were some people who got liberated earlier. They were already established, and they tried to help us to get well. In fact, I had there a distant, very distant family that I knew from before the war. And this young man was freed a lot earlier than me. And he paid for a non-Jewish lady to cook for me and to make me get well. And we were going to they had a Hayas office there too. We went to look for family. I met friends that I went to school with, and nobody from my family. Then from there, I stayed there a couple of weeks. From there, I was going to Romania, to Bucharest. A lot of survivors went there. As I say, we went to look for families. I came to Bucharest, and we were waiting to see some people. There were some people who were not in the camp, Jewish people. They took us in to live with them. And there's one particular family took me in, and a girlfriend of mine. They gave us food, and they were extremely nice to us.
Do you remember their name?
No. And we stayed there a couple of weeks. And everybody, every day, we went to this Hayas looking around for family. I didn't find any family there. But I met through a girlfriend of mine who knew my husband before the war. She introduced me to him. And he got liberated much earlier than I did because he was on hard labor and he ran away. So he was in a kibbutz in Bucharest. And he also came to the Hayas there looking for his family. And he was already dressed nice, looked very good. He had one sister, the youngest sister, with him in that kibbutz. And he had told me he is planning to emigrate to Israel. Would I be interested to go with him? Right there and then I said no, because my father was very much against kibbutz life, because the girls and the boys lived together. And I remembered that. So I did not want to join that kibbutz. So he says, okay, you don't want to come in the kibbutz, I'm going to leave for Israel in the next couple of days. The next day, I went back to that organization, and I met him there again. I said, you were supposed to leave. He said, I'm not leaving without you. He took me to his kibbutz and introduced me to his sister. And he talked me in. This is a kibbutz where it's a religious kibbutz. Girls and boys do not live together. My sister is here. You can stay here until we go. I agreed that I'm going to go. I didn't promise him I'm going to marry him, but I agreed to join the kibbutz. And we were going towards Israel.
And what is this man's name? The man you eventually married.
Edith Susman.
And you met him, and then the next couple of days you decided that you were going to try a new way of life. Is that right?
He encouraged me we should not stay in Europe, in that part of Europe. It's not, things do not look good. It's better if we go to Israel. But you couldn't go. The British were there. We were going towards Israel. We had to go through Budapest.
And as we're finishing now, before we take you on the next journey of your life, I wanted to ask you if you found any living relatives. Your sister survived.
Yes, my sister survived.
And what is her name?
Malka.
And
what happened was when we were going towards Israel, we went through Budapest. And we also stayed there a couple of days. And there was also the Hayas, and everybody went to look for family. I went there and I met there a girlfriend that I went to school with. And she says to me, your sister is coming tomorrow. You go to the train station. I says, my sister, she's alive. She says, yes, I was with her. She's coming tomorrow. I went with Edith Susman, my friend, to the station, and I heard already that my sister is alive, but my sister didn't hear that I was alive. I was standing near the train station, and she got off the train. She passed out. We couldn't believe that we'll ever see each other, and she was alive. And she stayed with me. And she came to the kibbutz. She was 2 years younger than I was, but she was very sick girl after the concentration camp. So we were traveling towards going to Israel. And we had to go in through Italy. First to Germany, from Budapest to Germany we went. From Germany, we were traveling towards Italy, but it wasn't so simple to go there. They didn't want us there, and somehow the Israeli soldiers managed to get us in there. And we stayed in Italy 2.5 years. While I was in Italy, I heard that one of my brothers, Yosel, survived, and he is in Germany in a hospital. I didn't have money to go to see him. He had some operation on his leg. And from there, when he got better, he was going to Israel, but he couldn't go there. They had to go to Cyprus. And he stayed there a couple of months. My sisters stayed with me in the kibbutz. Then she went between the young kids, the young Jugend. And the British allowed to go the young children to Israel legally. At that time, my sister was very sick. She couldn't stand on her feet. The Hayas sent her to Israel, to a Hadassah kibbutz, to a Hadassah hospital. And over there, they tried to cure her. She could not stand on her feet, very, very sick. And we found out that an uncle of ours found out through the Hayas that I survived. And I wrote to him that my sister is in a Hadassah hospital. He got in touch, and he sent all kinds of medication to the Hadassah hospital, and she came out of it, and she was healthy.
Okay, we're going to stop the tape now and continue on your story in a few moments.
Not yet?
Edith, we've been talking about your getting to Italy with Edith Susman and the fact that you found your sister and heard about your brother. What happens now from this point on with you and Sydney and your life when you get to Italy?
When we came to Italy, we stayed in a kibbutz, in a religious kibbutz. Sydney wanted to go to Israel. And I told him I cannot take hard life anymore. He was a very hard Zionist. He just wanted to go to Israel. We were not married at the time. We were just dating. And my uncle, when he found out I was alive, he asked me if I want to come to America. My dream was always to come to America. When I was growing up, my uncle came in 1936 to America, 38. And he wrote to my parents, I'd like to take Esther out to America. And they said, she's too young. We don't want to let her go. It's too dangerous. So my dream was always to come to America. And when things were so bad in Israel, we couldn't go legally there. Sidney changed his mind. He said, okay, we'll go to America. But we had to register on a quota. And our number was 28. And it took us and the Czechoslovakian quota took us 2.5 years to wait to come to America. In the meantime, in Italy, life was tough also. We had no work. We stayed in a kibbutz. We were just living off what the Americans sent us. The American joint in the Hayas sent us some food, but it was not enough. So while we were living there, we had relatives here, uncles and aunts. They were not helping us. They didn't send us money for food. And it was very tough. Somehow I got involved to help out in the kitchen in the kibbutz. So I used to steal eggs because Sydney wasn't used to starvation as much as I did. I used to steal eggs in my pocket and bring it to Sydney to have what to eat. Then things little by little got a little better. Sydney is a tailor, and we scraped together a few dollars. He bought an old sewing machine in the camp in Italy. It was a DP camp. We were waiting to go different places, a lot of people. And he did some fixing and made a few, some money, so we were able to buy food. But in the 2.5 years, it was very tough. Many times we felt, what for did we survive? We still have to sit in camps. We're still not free, totally free. We were able to walk around free, but we had to go. Nobody wanted us. But we came, after 2.5 years, we came to America.
Before we talk about your experience coming to America and living here, do you remember the names of the camps that you were in, the displaced person camps?
In Italy?
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember the names, but I remember the towns where we were. One was Santa Maria. Then they moved us to Bari, which was a little city. And that's where we stayed.
And within the camps, you lived with Jews in a kibbutz situation? Is that what you were describing?
No, we left the kibbutz because life wasn't so great in the kibbutz, so we went on our own. And there was no housing in those camps. Like, they gave us a room and we divided it with a sheet.
And at what point did you and Sydney get married the first time? Was that in the camps, or was...
We got married in Italy. We were still in the kibbutz, and they made us a wedding there because we had to wait that long 2.5 years. And I was hoping I'll come to America. My uncles are going to make me a wedding. But it took too long, so we had the wedding in Italy.
And what was the wedding like?
It was kibbutz life. Everybody was together, joyful. We were young, energetic. Somebody made me a wedding gown from a sheet, and it was perfect. And that's how we managed.
And you immigrated to the United States. You got here October 13th, 1947.
Yes.
How did you get to the United States from Italy?
From Italy, from Naples, I still remember, they put us on a military boat. It took us 3 weeks to come to this country. I got seasick the whole 3 weeks. It was just awful. The men were separate from the women. I couldn't get off to eat, but it was Americans were managing that ship. There was one particular man, he used to bring me a lemon to stop my nausea. I couldn't stand the smell of it, but we knew we're gonna be free. When the boat left from Naples, Italy, there wasn't a person happier in the world than we were. And when we came, we saw the Statue of Liberty. We had to go through all that and lose the families to get to that.
So you and Sydney settled in the United States. Where did you live?
When we came to the United States, one of my uncles, they had no children, he had an apartment. He took us into his home. And we stayed there. In that time, it was impossible to get an apartment. And we stayed for weeks there. And my uncle was working in a factory, sewing men's clothing. He took in Sydney to work with him in that place. And we had no high education. I had no trade, no education. So my uncle suggested I should go and work in a factory, trimming threads from the clothes. I hated it, but I had to do it because we had no money. My uncle wasn't a rich man. He couldn't help us. Finally, we got a furnished room in Brooklyn, and we lived with an old man. He was paying $45 a month, and he rented a room for us with the conditions I cook for him and clean for him and pay him $45 a month. And I did it. From there, I got a job in a factory working on ladies' jackets. And little by little, things were getting better. Somebody offered us an apartment in the Bronx, a one-bedroom apartment. And it was wonderful because it was my own. And we lived there, and we were traveling from the Bronx to Brooklyn to work, which it took 3 hours a day traveling. But we didn't mind. We were young. I had no children at that time. And it was ours. And we were very happy.
And shortly after that, you did have some children. Would you give us your children's names in order of their birth, please?
We have 3 children. My daughter, one of my daughters, her name is Susie. She was born in
1951?
51, yes. Then I have another daughter who was born in 1954. And I have a son who was born in 57.
And his name is?
Jeffrey. And my other daughter's name is Dorothy.
And you moved, your whole family moved to Los Angeles, actually to Encino, in 1981. Does that sound right?
I raised my children in New York. They went to school there. My son went to school there. My Susie moved out here to LA. And in that time, my husband already didn't feel too well. And Jeffrey finished school. He had to give up his job. He couldn't work anymore. And we moved here in 1981.
And what are some of the things now that you are involved in that you enjoy doing?
I am involved. I help people. I'm involved in the temple, which is called liberated. And we enjoy it very much. We help all kinds of people there, not only Jewish people. We give out a lot of food for non-Jewish, black, Amer, and I enjoy helping them. And we are very, very much involved. We met a lot of friends here. And we have...
What were you going to say?
We have 5 grandchildren.
What are your grandchildren's names? And what are their parents' names?
Susie and Barry has 2 children, Nicole and Jeremy.
And their last name is?
Brightman. And Dorothy was my second daughter. She lives in Boston. She has 1 daughter. Her name is Renita. And my son has 2 children. He lives in New York. He's a dentist. And he has a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old little girl.
And does your daughter, Dorothy, have a husband?
No.
And what about Jeffrey? Is he married?
He's married. He has a lovely wife. Her name is Amy.
Edith, what would you like your children and your grandchildren, who you love so much, to know about you as a person?
Well, one thing, my granddaughter, who was 20 years old, she made a report. She had to make a report about the Holocaust. She asked me all kinds of questions. She broke down terribly what I went through. So they know that we are good grandparents. We try to help them, and they do know what we've gone through.
And we talked a little about this before, but what do you think enabled you to survive the horrors of the war years, and to come out of it and to be able to make a life for yourself?
Well, one thing I missed out telling you, I was very aggressive. And I think that comes part of tough life. And in Mauthausen, I found a wire, and there was a kitchen. I used to get up at night and go to try unlock the kitchen with that wire to get some food. And a Gestapo was standing there with a rifle and said, "You know, I can shoot you. You're not allowed to do that." I answered him, "I'm going to die anyway. Go ahead, kill me." And he let me go. I came back to the barrack, and I laid down and I stole potatoes from that kitchen, raw potatoes. And I put the potatoes under my head where we were laying on the floor, sleeping there. And somebody stole the potatoes. Here I put my life in danger. I had nothing anyway. I guess I was tough. And I was able to survive. Had my sister been with me, she could never survive. Because I was in the worst places. My sister was in better places. She didn't go through what I went through. a Gestapo got a liking to her, and she gave her food, and she came out of it.
How do you think these experiences that were so difficult for you helped to influence the way you've lived your life in later years?
I think I had to be a fighter to survive. Even when we came to this country, life was very tough. And we tried, we were both ambitious. We didn't have education to get good jobs. So whatever we could get, we were not lazy to go and work. My husband had sometimes 2 jobs. After my children were born, things were very, very tough. He lost 1 job, and then finally he got another job. He had to travel 2 hours each way. He has to get up 5 o'clock at night, then come home and have dinner and go in the neighborhood, work for somebody else till 11 o'clock at night. Life was very tough, but I think my background, what I've lived through, I knew if I make $5, I have to put away $1 or $2 to have something. I had nobody to depend on. Nobody helped us. We did not go to the Hayas to ask for handouts. We did it on our own.
Did you ever tell your children of the stories of what happened to you?
Yes, yes.
I've come to the end of my questions. Is there anything else that you think that you would like to finish with? Anything you'd like to say or add?
For one thing, what I see is going on in the world today, I'm very scared for the Jewish people. I'm frightened. I listen to the radio all the time. I hear people calling God. Such an anti-Semitism. Last night, I heard a woman call up, Gloria, all right. It scares the hell out of me. I had such a bad dream about it. I am scared. But you can't predict the future. I just hope no people should have to go through what the Jews in Europe went through, to kill 6 million innocent people. For what reason? Parents, and what way to be killed? It's just horrifying. I'm grateful. I'm in this country. I feel free. I try to help people, no matter who, when. I'm always available. If it's financially, I can't do too much, but physically, I always help people. And I hope I will. I hope my children and grandchildren should never to witness what we've gone through in our lives. And this is a wonderful country. To be free is the best thing in life. Not to have Gestapos and dogs behind you and being beaten because you're a Jew.
Edith, thank you for sharing your story and for contributing to the survivors of the Shoah Foundation.
Thanks.
Edith, would you introduce your husband to us?
This is my husband. We are married 50 years, and we get along wonderful. Our kids say that it's unbelievable a marriage should be like ours. We met in terrible times, but thank God we made it, and we raised 3 wonderful children. I love them.
And what is your husband's name?
My husband's name is Edith Susman.
Cindy, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Not much. Just that I still remember the first day I met her. And I'm very grateful for that. she's a wonderful woman and a wonderful mother.
Thank you both.
You're welcome. This is a picture of my family. I remember when I was about 3 years old, I had an uncle in America. He came to visit us, and he took this picture. There are my parents, my two uncles, and an aunt, and myself and my sister. I was there about 3 years old, and my sister was 1 year old.
And about what year would this have been?
In 1926.
Well,
And 1920,
probably about 1929.
29, yes. And while I was in the camps, I remembered that this uncle came to visit us. And when I got liberated, I remembered that this picture must be in my uncle's house. And the way I thought about it, that's how I found this picture from my family. This is a picture of my grandfather, my father's father. I was about 7 years old maybe, and that's how I remember him. I do not remember what year he died and where he died.
What is his name?
His name was Beryl
And what was his last name?
Heisler.
And it must, if you were about, how old? About
3. No, about 7
All right, so
years,
this must have been maybe around early 1930s.
something.
And
like-
where was this picture taken?
And when my grandfather was living, the town was called Wolowitz, and that's where it was taken.
Thank you.
This is a picture of my sister who, after the war, she went to Israel, and she lived in a kibbutz, and she met her husband there, and they got married, and they had a little girl, and they lived there for about 15 years, and then they came to America.
And what is your sister's name?
My sister's name is Malka, and my brother-in-law's name is David, and the little girl's name is Rachel.
And what is their last name?
Palak.
And where is this picture taken?
In a kibbutz, I think,
Okay.
in Israel.
After the war.
This is my brother Yossel. This was after the war. He survived the Holocaust, and he went to Israel, and he lived in Israel. He worked there, and he was 22 years old, and he was married and had a 2-month-old son. Then he was killed instantly
How?
by explosion, and I never saw him after the war. This is a picture when Sidney and I got married. It happened in Italy. It was 1946, and we lived in a kibbutz, and they made us the wedding there, and we had our friends there. We did not have any family. And
Thank you.
we are happily married for 50 years.
Thank you.
This is a picture of my children. It was taken in 1995 in April. On the right side is my daughter Susie, her husband Barry, her daughter Nicole, and my grandson Jeremy. Then it's myself and Sydney, and my daughter Dorothy, my daughter-in-law Amy, and her 2 children. One is Carly and one is Jamie, and my son Jeff, and my granddaughter Renita, and my Dorothy's friend Mark. And they live, Susie and her family live in California, and Dorothy lives in Boston. Jeff and his family live in New York. We do love them and enjoy them very much.